Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the interview portion of the show this week. We are on live with Bill Ottman. Bill founded Minds back in 2011 with the goal of bringing a free, open source, and sustainable social network to the world. We all know how valuable that is, especially after the most recent happenings with Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook in front of the government. So a lot of value added there. Looking forward to diving into what is Minds and who it can help. But Bill has also co-founded multiple viral media organizations. He holds a fellowship at Boston Global Forum and serves on the advisory board of Code to Inspire, which is a nonprofit that builds coding schools for women in Afghanistan. Thanks for joining us today, Bill.
Thanks for having me.
So I guess before we dive into Minds and everything you guys are working on and the whole privacy standpoint of or unique selling proposition, I should say, that is Minds, what were you up to before you got into cryptocurrency? Like, how did you stumble onto Bitcoin in the first place?
I didn't stumble onto Bitcoin until a couple years into Minds, probably in about 2013, and it carries all the same values that we hold. It's open source, it's decentralized, it's uncensorable, and so I was living in New York City at the time. I was hanging out at the Bitcoin Center, which was down off of Wall Street, and also getting involved in the Ethereum community and just experimenting with it, paying for a couple dinners with it. And we had Bitcoin wallets in Minds in 2014, 2015, but we took them out because it was just not properly implemented. I think that we are definitely considering expanding into other crypto beyond just our own token. But yeah, it's the same value structure.
And so you started Minds before you found Bitcoin. So how did you have the idea to start Minds, or what was the journey like behind that?
I was just fed up with the behavior of the major social networks. They're just so abusive to everybody, whether it's censorship, surveillance, algorithm manipulation. I mean, literally in every component that they could be abusing people, they are. So, and we actually had some huge Facebook page with millions of followers, and firsthand we're watching the algorithms destroy our reach. So while back in 2012 we were reaching tons of people, driving huge traffic from Facebook, and this affected the whole media industry. You're only reaching 5% of your own Facebook followers organically now, and their newsfeed decides what is acceptable for everybody to see now. So it's really a joke. It's not even really worth. I mean, we don't use Facebook anymore. It's not even worth our time because the reach is so bad. So that and the privacy violations, we were like, okay, look, we're just going to build a separate social network. It seems like there's a big demand for it.
That's interesting. So the whole goal of it was to provide an open source code for a social network so others and essentially be completely transparent with the users. And back in 2011, how long did it take you guys to get some traction with user adoption? Like, is Minds something that a lot of people are seeing value in right now, or is this something that the masses need to be more educated on, and there more than likely might need to be some events that lead to a higher adoption curve on Minds, like, for example, the Zuckerberg trials?
Mm-hmm. I think it's both. I mean, we've always had a hardcore group of users who care about privacy and digital rights, and we've ever since we launched, we've had a good community. We're now like 1.5 million users, but I still think that, we have to hit the mainstream nerve harder. And I think a lot of that comes down to embedding the principles, but the value has to go beyond principles because a lot of people don't care. And that's okay. I mean, people just aren't educated. So there has to be value in just a human nature scenario. And I think that comes, the reach issue gets to that because everybody cares about that. It doesn't matter if you care about privacy, you care about how many likes you're getting. And when your likes are going down on Instagram and Facebook, everyone's like, well, what the hell? Why? I mean, I worked hard to build up this following. Why are you taking it away from me? So, that's hitting YouTube. Even Twitter doesn't default to a chronological feed anymore. And every time you go back to the chronological, they put you back to the curated thing. And so all the networks are doing this because their revenue, they know that they can increase their revenue when they show you what they want you to see. And what their algorithms detect, you're more likely to engage with. But what that does is screws up the reach for the publishers. And, you're not reaching everyone who subscribes to you, which is really the essential use case of social media. If you don't have confidence that you're going to reach the people that you're posting to, there's a big disconnect happening. So right. I think that between that and the monetization element and sort of a gamified system, we're trying to hit more of a popular nerve, and it's happening slowly. I think we do still have some work to do on the app and the UX, but it's getting much better really fast, and we're growing. So that's all that matters.
Yeah, that's great. So would you say that now, where we're at today, is this something, decentralization, open source, and non-censorship, is that something that is attracting only large-scale publishers, or do you think that the general consumer, a person with a personal profile, would see the value in that right now?
They're definitely starting to, and we got a huge new wave of users after going on Rogan the other day. Just really, really smart people, great creators, artists, journalists, writers, musicians, all these kinds of people who, aren't necessarily privacy experts. I mean, I think most people care about this stuff, but they feel helpless. And it's more like, I think Facebook's sort of becoming, and Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube, it's like the fast food of social media. So, people are used to it. They're kind of addicted to it. And getting them to switch is going to take a long time, but we're starting to see that people who do care about where they're putting their energy are starting to realize that if they want things to change, then they need to start supporting alternatives.
Right. And when you initially created Minds, is the buckets of users that you now have, are those the type of avatar that you thought would be taking the most benefit out of the platform and using it initially?
Yeah, it's pretty much playing out in the way that we predicted. So, recently Facebook had a huge surge of, or not surge, purge.
Yeah, all the bot accounts.
Well, not just bot accounts, but like alternative media, like hundreds of alternative media pages with millions of followers were deleted. And these were legitimate alternative media sources. I mean, I know some of these people like Free Thought Project, Anti-Media. I think, even just the other day, like a couple of RT journalists got censored. And so a lot of that type of community has adopted it. Every time there's a scandal with big tech, we see growth. So Yeah, I mean, and also, a lot of the transition is dependent on big influencers on the big networks. I mean, they're so powerful. These people are starting to clue in to what's going on. And once the big movers, the people with the biggest followings, start to switch, there's nothing that Facebook and YouTube are going to be able to do. I mean, when they lose their core people because they've betrayed them so hard, it's going to be really hard for them to recover. I'm not saying that. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not saying that it's.
Go ahead. No, your audio was a little quiet, but it's coming through.
Okay. Yeah, it's going to take a long time for someone to beat Facebook and Google. But at the same time, major shifts can happen really quickly. I mean, I always, I'm excited for an event similar to, ironically, Pokemon Go was actually a really inspiring viral event. They got like hundreds of millions of users in just a few days. And now that app is proprietary. It's probably spying on everyone. I'm not saying the app itself is positive, but the way that it got mass adoption, and I was living in New York at the time as well, it was scary. People were running into Central Park looking at their phones trying to catch these Pokemon all over the city. It was crazy. It was like borderline zombie apocalypse, but also just inspiring because it was like, whoa, you can see massive transformations happen overnight, essentially. So it's a little bit harder for us to hit those kind of network effects because, we're privacy focused. So we're not just going to steal everybody's contacts in order to grow fast, but it can still happen. And so we're working really hard on figuring out ways to make that happen.
And so do you have any data on users who join Minds? Are they still using Facebook? Are they still using Twitter or YouTube? Or are they really just pivoting to a new social outlet? Or are they, or is it more of just another medium that they can use to attract traffic?
We don't really have full data on that. Just from my perception, definitely a solid percentage have completely left.
Mm-hmm.
But also a solid percentage are doing both. And I think that there's value to both. I think we need some people dabbling in both and pulling more people over from there. There's an argument to work within the matrix to kind of try to transform it or bring people over. So, and I'm not claiming to be some like hyper purist. Like I've left all of those social platforms, but like I'm not going to lie and say that Google is completely out of my life.
Right.
I'm trying to make it happen, but it's really hard. I mean, for instance, I just cracked my phone. I had to get a new phone. It came with the Google version of Android. There's a cool project actually called Purism that I'm looking at. It's like puri.sm, which is doing fully free open source and encrypted laptops and phones that are it's not running Android, it's running like a different version of Linux. But it's really cool to see projects like that popping up.
Yeah, I think now is when a lot of the real companies will rise to the top, and a bear market's a good time to create infrastructure. We desperately need it. That's pretty evident. I think that a lot of people are looking for alternatives to Facebook and to Twitter, but they just don't know where to go, and there's a huge pain of disconnect there for them because, like you said, these people are getting their daily dopamine from their notifications, their likes, 10 likes, 100 likes, however many. And I mean, I'm just wondering, what is the likelihood that the general user will feel the impact of the organic reach diminishing on Facebook?
It's a good question. I think it doesn't matter if you're getting on average 100 likes per post or 10 likes per post or 3 likes per post. I think that I do think people are noticing it. I mean, I've hung out with people and just overheard conversations where, they're talking about it. They're like, well, how many likes did you get on this post? And that's not healthy in itself to be so concerned about that. But I think that there's a very natural reason to be concerned about that, because it's, your ability to communicate with your community. It's not like, okay, yeah, some people are probably upset because of their own narcissism, but there's also a rational reason to care about that. Most people have spent years on these platforms. When you give years of your life to a app, I mean, that's a lot of commitment and time. And for them to kind of switch the model on you years in, I don't consider that okay. And I don't think most people do, but they sort of feel helpless. So, but one thing that's interesting is that small creators, especially on Minds, get better reach than they do on these other platforms. It doesn't matter if we have a fraction of the user base. We have enough of the user base so that people can sign up, start earning tokens or buy tokens, and just basically one token gives you 1,000 impressions when you boost with it. So there's a little button on each of your posts that says boost. Every day you're earning tokens for your engagement, your activity, your contributions, and you can use those to boost or send to other users. And if you go to minds.com/token, there's more information about, like, if you want to buy them or if you want to learn how to earn them and see all the different use cases for them. But people get better reach. I mean, there's people who spend a decade on Twitter just posting thousands of posts, and they never get more than like a few hundred followers. And people who put that type of energy into Minds will definitely see thousands and thousands of followers.
So is it necessary for a publisher on Minds to pay for their users, for their community to see their post, or is that more of just an advertising model?
Yeah, that's on top. So you get 100% reach to all your followers forever. Like, we're committed to that forever. But if you want to reach more people beyond who subscribe to you to kind of get momentum going, then you can use the tokens that you earn to get more reach beyond the people who follow you.
Got it. And I think it's a pretty big issue. A lot of these terrorism organizations are getting on Facebook and driving so much engagement. They're creating recruitment and really accumulating all sorts of resources through online marketing. Do you see that as a potential problem for you guys down the line at Minds if you're not censoring content?
It's not that we're not taking down any content. Like, it has to be legal.
Okay, got
and
it.
if people are inciting violence, then that's not legal. I think that there is gray area there, but we typically in the gray areas with stuff that you're not, like, we're most areas where we get legal guidance that this could be illegal, then we're probably going to err on the safe side. But so our content policy is, orders of magnitude more open than Facebook, Twitter, Google. I mean, if it's lawful, it can stay, and it's only in the rare edge cases that it's going to get moderated. But we are actually also moving into more of a peer moderation system, because realistically, the status quo for how moderation is happening is not good. Like, there was actually this crazy piece that just came out about Facebook moderation and how all of these moderators have PTSD. And it's like,
I actually saw that yesterday.
Yeah, it's a good article. And we have moderated. I do some moderation. There's sometimes crazy stuff on the internet, but ultimately we don't want to be the gatekeepers. We are going to actually build out this juror system, community moderation system, where essentially if appeals happen, then members of the community there'll be a voting pool, and so the community can actually be involved with that. as opposed to, it just being us. And so it's like you're getting more community consensus. And obviously we still want them to follow as long as it's legal, it can stay. But it's just taking ourselves out of this equation where we're subjectively deciding. I don't think it's really healthy to have so few people involved in that process.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So who is Minds for? I know you mentioned artists, journalists. Who did you set out to create Minds for originally, and what is the USP really if you boil it all down?
I mean, I think it's for all different creators, and just people who are interested in connecting with others on the internet, like-minded or not like-minded. We're seeing lots of creators using it because we have tools specifically to help creators grow. But there's so much content, even if you just like to consume the news and articles about what's going on, and it's funny. I mean, I think that most social apps are sort of coalescing into being quite similar in terms of functionality, and who it's like if you ask that question about like Snapchat, Instagram, it's like, well, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, pretty much everybody. Like it's not like we're focused on, obviously we want the crypto community to come in, we want the media people and people who care about these issues. I think that's a good foundational niche. But at the end of the day, every app is sort of becoming the same thing. You post videos, you post photos, you share stuff. So we are trying to become really competitive in having all of those great features, but at the same time, the back end of what's happening is completely the opposite of all of those big companies, where it's transparent, it's encrypted, it's moving towards decentralization. And it's honestly shocking to me that none of the big tech apps are really focused on this in too deliberate of a way.
Right. And you mentioned you started Minds before finding Bitcoin, and we all know that blockchain technology is inherently slow. So how does Minds use blockchain technology?
Yeah, it is slow. Most of our stack is not blockchain. So we use the Ethereum blockchain for peer-to-peer financial transactions. So like if I want to tip somebody, or if I want to subscribe to somebody monthly in tokens, or if I want to boost my content with tokens, that can all be happening on chain. But for the rest of the app and like the heavy lifting in video and all these kinds of things, like, yeah, we have servers, so we're not fully decentralized on Minds.com. But we were just at ETH Denver over in mid-February, and we are working on a fully decentralized app. It's called Nomad, and it uses the ETH address from your Minds wallet as sort of like who you are in the system, kind of like your identity. And it uses the DAT protocol, which is a torrent style peer-to-peer network, and it's much more scalable than blockchain, and it's fully decentralized. So that's really interesting. We should have an initial app ready definitely in the next few months on that. And so we're trying to have one foot in both worlds, kind of. I don't think that centralization is inherently evil. I think it's risky. And so we want to have a parallel, fully decentralized network, but there's also really cool things that you can do on centralized servers, like, streaming video, and just a lot that the distributed web hasn't gotten to yet. I think there's cool projects that are pursuing that. But in order to be able to build a big community that's going to be competitive with the major social networks, you kind of have to be using as much tech as you can get your hands on.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think honestly, the reason that a lot of the decentralized projects have failed is because they're taking too absolute an approach to decentralization. And I mean, make no mistake, that's where we're headed and that's where we want to go. But we need to do it in a way that is going to allow us to grow and be sustainable without, just dying in the fight.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, I think there's a happy medium there, right, between decentralization and centralization, which will preserve the value of the experience for the user. Because at the end of the day, one way, if you're too far right or too far left, it doesn't create a good experience necessarily for the user. So it's good that you're trying to find that nexus point of the two. Is you mentioned Nomad, the app, is that concept what you see as the biggest potential for blockchain technology in social networking?
It's interesting. I'm not sure. I think the blockchains have a long way to go, and there are alternative blockchains that are popping up that are more scalable, and so we're constantly open to looking at the different options and maybe bringing in multiple chains for different use cases. We're like just today, we were talking about potentially actually publishing some content to Ethereum when you do on-chain transactions, like some of the status posts. But it's just it's so slow, and it's a really rough user experience. Most people aren't going to understand how to set up MetaMask, but a lot will. It's really not that hard. So I don't know. We're just maintaining an open mind to different options, and I don't think it is healthy to be absolute there's lots of tools that are going to come together to make the ultimate solution. I mean, in the rest of our stack, we're using Cassandra and CockroachDB and Angular and React and all of these different frameworks. Node, that's what it takes to build a full-blown social network. It's not like you can just do everything on blockchain.
Yeah, and
there's no project. I mean, very few social apps would ever be able to achieve something with only blockchain. Like you need a multitude of tools to create a user experience.
Yeah, definitely a good user experience, anyways.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
Minds has its own coin built on ERC20. Is that right?
Yes.
So is for, let's say, if a publisher wanted to run some ads on the Minds platform, is your token the only one accepted right now? Is there any plans for future tokens, or is it already open to multiple cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, for now it's just ours, but we're definitely going to be opening it up to different tokens. Certainly more ERC20. We've already started working on that, and Bitcoin. Obviously, we want to bring back as soon as we can. It's just about finding the right integrations and prioritizing, and it's the monetization aspect in general is very high priority for us, both in terms of being able to sell our tokens with multiple types of currencies and allowing users to send each other and accept multiple types of currencies. I think that's, we don't want to be the only token. I think that's not a reasonable stance. The only reason that we wanted to push, like we took out Stripe when we started our token. We used to allow users to send each other dollars back and forth, but Stripe has its own problems, and we wanted to push a lot of energy in the token to see what happens, but now we're probably going to be expanding back out.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about Facebook and Twitter and what's happening over there. Many would agree that these big social media giants have shot themselves in the foot, sort of. What do you think is the biggest mistake that you see them making right now?
They're just so inconsistent. Well, actually, Facebook is consistently displaying pathetic behavior. But, Twitter is one of those examples where you just don't even know what's going on behind the scenes there. Like, certain posts they'll leave up, certain posts they censor. None of them are really walking the walk in terms of being open source, which is just disappointing. I don't know, I actually do know why they don't do it, but I also don't think that it's a smart decision to not be transparent. I don't know. I don't know where to start. I think there's so much social and political pressure for them to fit a certain mold.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just not enough leadership that understands the long-term view that, for instance, with censorship or, open sourcing the code, it's like I can just imagine those board meetings where they're having these debates, and I'm sure they're having the debates, and it's not as if there's no one probably in these companies advocating for moving back in the direction of freedom. I actually know there are. I think it was a Wired piece about the internal battles at Twitter over free speech, because their slogan was the free speech wing of the free speech party. There's marketing materials that we found of Twitter from like 10 years, I don't know if it was 10 years ago, five years ago maybe, where they're talking about, oh no, we don't even moderate content. Like you can say what you want. Just really stuff that you would never see now because they've completely switched. So I don't know what's going to happen. You see them talking about crypto. You see Dorsey getting into Bitcoin. Obviously, the Cash App sells Bitcoin. Zuckerberg just did this weird talk with Jonathan Zittrain of the Berkman Center at Harvard, and they were talking all about decentralization and potentially doing like a decentralized blockchain authentication system that would replace Facebook Connect. But it's all veiled in this obscurity about, first of all, it would probably be all proprietary code. Maybe it would be open source, but you really get it. I recommend watching it. It's on Zuckerberg's page, and you can see into his thought process about it. And he really does seem to, not be on board. He really wants control is the sense that I get. And I think that he is being pressured into having these conversations. And, with things like the content policy, I just, there's no way that you can win when you have a content policy that is so restrictive, because there's so many cases where you're going to allow one thing and take down another thing, and it's just, I don't know. I don't consider their models to be sustainable, and I guess it's good that they're starting to talk about it, but they're not being leaders, and they're not being confident. They're really just sort of trying to keep up and stay relevant. But, I would be happy if one of them just stepped up and made a bold statement, but it doesn't seem like that's happening.
Yeah, I don't really see that happening in the future either. I remember when Zuckerberg was going through, I think it was 3 days of questioning in front of Congress, it seemed like he was almost laughing on the inside at some of the questions they were asking him. And it was so surprising how oblivious the leaders of the country are to what's happening on social media. That whole situation was engineered because of the issues with Russia and the election and everything, but it seemed like nobody even touched on that. They just were trying to figure out the platform in the first place, and how the algorithm works. And it really just seems like Zuckerberg all he cares about is the bottom line at the end of the day. He doesn't care about the narrative that is being broadcasted to, I guess they have billions of accounts now on Facebook. I mean, it's pretty scary if you think about it, how many people are being brainwashed on the daily of what they want you to see and hear, and how they want you to feel when you actually consume that content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that relates to what Twitter's been talking about conversational health. And they think that they can engineer health, and they Facebook tries to engineer your mood. We know that they've done experiments trying to make people happy or sad through their news feed. And yeah, I mean, I think Zuckerberg does want to connect everyone in the world, but he wants to do it in a way that isn't like consensual.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to force everybody to connect. And he actually made a twisted statement in the Zittrain interview where he said he thought that they really were decentralized, that they were like decentralizing power and giving more people a voice. And, in some contorted interpretation of decentralization, I guess you could make that argument, but it's really like, hijacking the term,
right?
For him to say, I mean, and look, Facebook and Twitter and Google have been important evolutions. I mean, clearly they're the biggest networks in the world, but just because they've been the biggest networks in the world and they've connected people and, they've helped start, movements and whatnot, that doesn't mean that their behavior and the way that they did it was acceptable just because people figured out positive ways to use it. It doesn't exonerate them from abusing people's freedoms.
Mm-hmm. Now, you guys are developing the app or the technology behind Nomad. You guys are working on some exciting things behind the scenes at Minds, and I think you've taken a good stance on privacy and decentralization. I agree with it. I think many would agree with it, but there's too much pain of disconnect to actually allow their actions to reflect their opinion. What is something that you see, to be true that almost nobody else agrees with you on?
Oh, you grabbed that from Peter Thiel, didn't you?
I did.
I know that question. That's a great question. I would say that I think all apps should be free and open source and fully transparent. And even beyond that, most products, not even just apps, like it extends into, sharing the blueprints of your creations, and this whole mass conception that you need to lock down the blueprints of what you create in order to be successful with it or make money. It's just a myth. I mean, in fact, it can be the opposite. If you unleash the nature of the idea that you created, it actually can give it more legs so that you can make more money and become more successful, and you can monetize it in different creative ways. So, and I even remember when we first released all the source code for Minds, there's sort of like a scary moment there where you're like, oh God, is someone gonna come and
what are people gonna do with this?
What are they gonna do with it? Are they gonna take it? Are they gonna beat us? Are they gonna compete with us? But that's all just irrational. If you have people reiterate. So I was just saying that people are irrationally afraid of sharing whether it's the code of their tech or the blueprints of their invention or the content itself. And I think the most innovation occurs globally when we all share what we're doing. And you can still make money, and you can arguably make more money by sharing the nature of what you're building. And like, I remember when we first open sourced all our code, it was kind of scary. Like, I felt myself, being like, well, shit, is somebody gonna take this and like beat us and compete with us? And that's the fear that everybody has, and that's why more places don't free their software. But it's not a rational fear. We only have seen massive benefit from being more transparent. So I think that within business in general, people need to realize that being more transparent is going to improve their business.
And do you think that's where we're headed, is mass decentralization?
Yeah, I would say mass decentralization, mass transparency, almost like radical transparency. And that doesn't mean that your rights aren't protected. That doesn't mean that you can still license things creatively, and you can still architect systems in ways that protect people and simultaneously protect their freedom. So, yeah, that's what's that question?
That's what I was going to ask you is, so do you think that mass decentralization almost is polar opposite to the capitalist system we live in?
Not necessarily. I think that it's just no, I mean, it can certainly work with capitalism. I mean, I would say Bitcoin is capitalism at work, but it's also a common infrastructure. So it's not really capitalism or socialism. It's a common project. I don't know what you would call that. I don't think you can really polarize a definition of decentralization.
More so than capitalism, though, I mean how the capitalist system is engineered to reward certain people and to keep others, the masses, really out of the elite, if you will, because,
well, that's more crony capitalism,
right?
I mean, yeah, I think that mass decentralization empowers people to become participants in the economy much more so than when you have these hierarchical, like, lockdown environments that are not accessible to everybody.
Yeah, it could definitely empower a lot of people, and mostly people in the crypto industry right now are really just waiting for that day when decentralization is something that the masses are benefiting from every day, and hopefully that won't take too long to achieve, and it's people like you who are really pushing things forward for us all. So thank you for that on behalf of myself and the audience here. To wrap things up, though, if you wouldn't mind, if you would indulge us for a minute, we like to make a prediction every week on the price of Bitcoin. We didn't go too far into that today, into Bitcoin and price action and anything related to trading, which was refreshing, and I again appreciate that as well. But what do you see the future of Bitcoin in terms of price. How do you see that playing out? Like, what's your price prediction for the short term and the long term?
I'll kind of come into that from the back end. I mean, I think that we're seeing developer activity at an all-time high for crypto, both Bitcoin and Ethereum. Even if you actually look at like the Git developer pushes, you're seeing, lots of stuff being built on top of the infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So I think that the price is definitely going to follow that. The more applications that are running on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other blockchains, the more value that is going to be undeniable. And, we're starting to see that. I mean, so I don't really know how useful it is for me to say an actual number. But I think that we're seeing all-time high developer activity. So as long as we see that developer activity happening, I don't see the price really dipping.
Mm-hmm. So would you say with that in mind that because of all the developer activity that Bitcoin could be undervalued at the current price?
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, good to know. I think our community got what they wanted out of that one. So thank you, Bill, again for stopping by today. Where can people go to learn more about you and what you got going on?
Yeah, find me at minds.com/Ottman, Ottman. Definitely hit me up. And one, piece of advice that I would say for a former Facebook user is that one method that helped me leave was to just deactivate. And then every time you need it, you can reactivate. And then when you leave, you can deactivate. And that is really useful because you don't feel like you're just losing everything, and you'll start to continuously be surprised by how little you actually need it.
Great advice. And I was going to ask you if you have any closing words for our listeners.
Yeah, just if this stuff interests you, it's so helpful to the whole movement. Not even just to get Minds and sign up, but for all of the different apps that are involved in this, whether it's a browser, whether it's an operating system, whether it's another social app that cares about these values. Just using the stuff. It doesn't mean you have to leave all the old stuff, but just using it, and whether it's using Bitcoin, using crypto, using Minds, using Firefox rather than Chrome or Safari. It's just like those are the things that change everything. Mm-hmm. So unless we're using the things that we're talking about, then we're really wasting our own time.
All right, Bill Ottman, cool. Everybody. Yeah, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, let's get the podcast up on Minds.